Christmas is a magical time of year. Last week, I used one simple tool to magically turn a cover plate die into a stamp. Let's see what else we can do with this tool. Hurley's stamping foam has been around for a while now, but I just recently started using it. I started a couple of weeks ago and I used it with a background stamp. And I didn't do a very good job explaining how using this was any different than just using the stamp itself. So let me try again. Here's the Jewel Heist background stamp from Hurley. It's one of Simon's genius pull-apart stamps, which gives a ton of flexibility in itself, but that's not why we're here today. I'm going to start by just stamping the stamp so we'll have a point of comparison when I stamp it again with the foam. I'm using Juniper Mist, Cove Blue, Stone Blue, and Pixie Dust today for a frosty look for my Christmas cards. Here's the stamp panel. The lines of the design are inked and there are white spaces. So let's try it now a couple of different ways with the stamping foam. First, I heat it up. My tips for this are to do it for about 20 seconds and try to keep the heat moving all over the surface of the foam. You want it to be equally pliable all over so that you get an even impression and a good quality result. Once it's heated, press it down onto the stamp. Try and work quickly because you need the surface to be warm and soft to take the impression of the stamp. Pressing down with an acrylic block can help make sure that the pressure is even. Okay, that's pretty good. Now I can use the foam as a stamp. I put the 4 colors of ink down in horizontal stripes and then give the foam a spritz of water and press it down onto a panel of white cardstock. It's pretty. It's not as crisp as I would like it to be, but you can see how by using the foam you can get the opposite of the stamp. Now the lines are white and the spaces are colored. But I'm going to give it another try. I heated up the foam, this time leaving it on my glass work surface. And this time I'm going to press the stamp down into the foam. And I think that having that hard surface behind the foam really made a difference because this time the impression is much more distinctive. I inked it up again and yep, I can see even as I'm inking that I'll get a better result. See, it's much more crisp. The other one is fine and it just shows that you can get different looks just by changing up your technique. I'll be finishing all my cards today in pretty much the same way, but this one is a little special because I used both of the panels. The stamped one with more white space is in the background, and then the foam stamped one with the white lines is the smaller panel on top. I used 2 more magical products that I'm loving right now. The Joy Sentiment is cut from Inca Gold cardstock from Tonic Studios, which is gold, but it's also iridescent, and in these photos you'll see it glow and change color. And to go along with that, Enchanted Forest Gems from Crafty Meraki. Again, they have a gold base, but with an iridescent shimmer in pinks and greens. Now, just before I move on, one of the other magical things about the foam is that you can just keep spritzing and stamping to get even more prints. Each one will get lighter and lighter, but they're still pretty and will make beautiful backgrounds. Then when it's time to clean it, just spritz more water and wipe it off with a cloth or a baby wipe. I'm using a wipe here, but later in my stamp foam session, I changed to a microfiber cloth, and I found that I like that much better. Today's video is part of a Holiday Magic video hop, along with these lovely ladies. It's hosted by Robin, the Delta Crafter, and I've put the full list of stops below in the description, so be sure to hop for even more magical inspiration. Next, I'm using a cover plate die. I tried this one last week and I got a really good result, I thought. This week, I'm using this Mosaic cover plate from Pigment Craft Company. I think that the sharpness and firmness of the dies make it easy to get good results with the stamping foam. Again, I'm heating it on my glass surface and then pressing the die into the foam rather than the other way. And again, I got a good impression, although I need to remember to make sure that I press evenly along the edges to make sure that the impression goes right edge to edge. This time I'm inking it up on a diagonal, just for something a little different. Then I spritzed and I got another pretty crisp and clear result. Again, I gave it another go and I got another very pretty, almost watercolory looking panel that I can save for a future card. But I do have a thought. I don't know about you, but I'm not always very good about going back and using my extra panels. So maybe it's better for me to, quote, waste the ink right now rather than to waste the panel. What would you do? Okay, so now I'm going to try a regular die. This time I've got the Lydia Snowflake from Picket Studios. This is one of my favorites. I like the little frog feet on the ends of the arms. I heated up the foam and I pressed the die into it just like the cover die. I decided to offset it since I knew I couldn't fit it all on this foam. This time I tried inking it up in concentric circles with the pixie dust in the center, and then I worked my way out through the blues. I even used a blending brush to try and soften the center a little. I find that spritzing helps to blend the colors, and the fact that I'm using mostly blues helps as well, but using a blending brush between different colors helps it look a little more organic. This one's one of my favorites. Somehow it takes on more of a mandala shape, so I think this one could be used for other occasions too. This one needed a smaller sentiment to allow that snowflake to take center stage, so I grabbed this little joy die from the Avery Elle Happy Tags holiday set. I just had to snip off the little tag hole from the shadow to magically transform it from a tag into a regular sentiment. Okay, now those were both items I've had a little experience with, and now I'm venturing into new territory with a couple of different tools. First, an embossing folder. I figured a 3D embossing folder would probably be best because it would be easier to get some texture into the foam with the higher edges of the design. I chose the Altenew Dotty Circles folder. It has the look of a snowy day. And I thought for a minute about which side of the embossing folder I should use, and I went with the one with the dots sticking up. They'll indent into the foam and end up being white on my panel, just like snow. I wanted smaller areas of color, so I got out my mini ink pads. I don't have the mini for the Cove Blue, so I just left that color off this card. And now as I'm watching, I'm wondering, if I didn't have the foam, could I get a similar look by just inking up the embossing folder? That's something I didn't think to try until just now, and I haven't done a lot of inking on embossing folders, so let me know what you think. I'm pretty happy with this groovy looking snowstorm. When I started making these cards, I was kind of wishing that I had a larger full-size panel foam, but by the time I was finishing the cards, I realized that there's a big advantage to this size. You can easily cut it down with a small border, which gives you the look of a clean white mat without adding another layer to your card. Here's another experiment, a stencil. Now you and I know that a stencil is very thin, and it's hard to imagine that you're going to be able to get a lot of texture from it. This is the sweater pattern stencil from Hero Arts. I went with my proven technique of pressing the stencil into the foam on my glass mat to try and get as much definition in the pattern as possible. And I must have been getting lazy at this point, or maybe just skeptical about my results, that I only used one color on this one. And I actually got a pretty solid result. And by that I mean solid. You can see the pattern, but it's really mostly tone on tone. I quickly blended ink through the stencil so that we can see the difference. And then I wondered if I was just too heavy-handed with my ink, so I re-inked the foam, and that's something else you should know. The impression will stay in the foam until you heat it up again with your heat tool, so you can re-ink and get as many impressions as you want. This time I tried to be very light-handed with my inking, really just hitting the areas on the stamp that were raised, and still trying for full coverage. So once again, just by changing how you're using it, you can get a very different look. Since this one didn't have any of the pixie dust on it, I added a couple of die-cut snowflakes. And I should mention that all the navy blue mats and shadows are actually navy blue cardstock. You've heard me say that I don't keep a lot of colored cardstock on hand, but I do keep red, dark brown, black, navy, and craft. And in a situation where I'm making a bunch of cards, it's much faster than making my own colored cardstock with my ink pads. This happens a lot at Christmas time, which influences the choice of the colors I keep in stock. Okay, let's get out of the craft room. I've got this cast iron trivet that I use to keep hot pots off my counter, and its ornate design means it will be a great candidate for this technique. Look at that impression. This time I inked it up with the lighter colors in the center, and I went around the edges with the Juniper mist to give definition to them. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's got a classic feel that doesn't have to be Christmassy. In fact, that's kind of a theme here, isn't it? Most of these backgrounds could be used for any occasion. I didn't even use particularly Christmassy colors. Just the addition of a golden Christmas sentiment and some sparkle makes these festive. But talk about versatile. Okay, last one. This is a plastic placemat from Crate & Barrel. It's very textured, and I wondered if it was strong enough to work with the foam. And it is! Again, I was lazy and I only used one color, but now that I know it works, I went back and I pressed it down again with the pattern going horizontally rather than vertically, and I inked it up with the pixie dust and stamped it right on top to try and create kind of a small plaid pattern. I actually think this is one of my favorites. It looks like if you touch it, you'll actually feel the texture, almost like fabric. This little gray lump of foam doesn't look very magical, does it? But sometimes magic is hidden, and if you want a new toy for Christmas, this is a great thing to add to your wish list. It's less than $10 and there's so many possibilities. Sounds like magic to me. There's more magic from the other crafters in the hop too. Use the links in the description below to follow along. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.